says a little afternoon, so let's go ahead and start. Some others will be joining us, I'm sure, both in person and also by Zoom. Good afternoon, I'm Sylvia Oberlin, a member of the planning team for Faith in the City here at Knollwood, and we are so glad that you've joined us. Along with our other planning team members, Dean Clifford, Diane Lipset, and Spence O'Neill, we welcome you today. We are continuing to offer a hybrid format for our meeting, so we also welcome those of you on Zoom. We have about a dozen or so joining us already, and others will be joining. As we said last month, during the pandemic, when we switched to Zoom, many people from outside Winston-Salem started to join us. And we're glad that we can use our technology and that we're getting better about technology so that they can continue being part of Faith in the City, as well as those here otherwise not able to attend. So we appreciate the growing interest in these important conversations and their work, and they're successful because of you and because of your commitment and because of your participation. We are looking forward to our discussion today on what is an extremely important topic. The elections coming up in November are in so many ways some of the most significant across the board that I know I've seen, and I know you feel the same way. So we are glad to be able to sponsor today's information session and hopefully some robust discussion on why our votes matter and how we can best prepare and educate ourselves for making these important decisions. Before we begin our program, a few housekeeping matters. As I said a few minutes ago, feel free to eat your lunch. I'm glad to see that some of you are. This is a lunch and learn. There are cookies and drinks in the back. Feel free to get up as you want to along the way. Before you leave today, if you are not on our email contact list, and we're excited to have almost 300 people on our contact list, but if you're not getting those emails on a monthly basis so far, and you haven't already given us your information, please do so at the table in the back, because we want to include you in information about our subsequent programs. And Faith in the City meets every month, September through May, on the first Tuesday of the month. So put that on your calendar and you'll get information about it as well. We are pleased to have with us this afternoon 3 people who are bringing their particular expertise, experience, and passion to different aspects of the upcoming election. We'll be focusing on trends affecting elections across the country and how we can best educate and prepare ourselves on a range of state and local issues affecting educational equity. And even more specifically, our local school board contest, which, like many of those in communities across the country, are generating an unprecedented amount of interest. I'm going to introduce them briefly and then turn it over to them for their presentations. First, Dr. Elizabeth Wemlinger is Associate Professor of Political Science and Public Policy at Salem College. At Salem, she is also co-director of the Health Advocacy and Humanitarian Systems program, as well as the Center for Action in Public Service. Her graduate work and ongoing research deals with a wide range of domestic and international equity issues. In particular, she is exploring the diverse ways that equity can be encouraged by the government, as well as nonprofits in the U.S. and abroad. Amy Schumann is a co-founder of Women of Action, a grassroots organization that began in late 2016. The mission of Women of Action is to inspire civic and community engagement with about 500 local members. Members encourage each other to take action on a variety of issues that promote democratic principles, as well as promoting justice, equity, dignity, and inclusion. Women of Action helps connect members to other community organizations who are leading efforts in doing their work. And so they've done a key amount of work involving extensive voter guides for state and local elections, which Amy will tell us more about. And Valerie Brokenrock describes herself as a strong supporter of public education and is a mother of 3 children who attended local schools. 2 are now in college and 1 is a freshman in high school. She has been a PTA president for the downtown school and involved in other leadership roles with Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. She has developed a particular interest and passion in our local school board race, spending her time speaking to groups like ours and others about how people can find out more about the candidates from their own websites and relevant endorsements, as well as other sources. We've asked each of our panel members to speak for about 10 to 12 minutes each, starting with Beth, Amy, and Valerie. And we'll hold your questions or write them down. We'll have adequate time for Q&A at the end of our presentations. And those on Zoom, as you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll be sure to include them in our discussion. So join me in welcoming our panelists to Faith of the City today.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation today. I'm going to try to keep this at 12 minutes or less, so we'll see how successful I am. So I'm going to talk about the political landscape and how we think about those factors that are going to impact the election, impact the races. And the three things we're going to think about, or we're going to talk about, are turnout. Midterms, right, have a kind of notoriously low turnout. And access to the ballot. Think about the cost. How much does it cost a voter to come out? And then those policy issues that might motivate to different demographics to come out than we might see in other elections. So there's been a lot of talk about the economy. And we see, though, that only about 47% of people saw the economy as the most important issue currently. And as you can see from the data, it's only higher than other years, but not, significantly like during that 2008 period when we had the Great Recession. So we know most people can turn out for economic issues because it affects all of us. Other non-economic issues are more difficult to understand how they might impact turnout. People like to talk about bad government, poor leadership. Will that motivate them to come out to vote? It's not what we see typically. And on other issues, immigration might become a major issue, especially with some of the busing of migrants to northern states that has become. As you see at the very bottom, only 2% of people said that education was the most important problem. And so how this kind of falls in the spectrum of the midterms. So I told myself it wouldn't be too election long today, but I did have to put up May Silver at 5:38 and talk about predictions, right? Other races are going to be very close, especially control of the Senate. And so in battleground states like North Carolina, this is going to motivate people to come out and vote and motivate a more general independent population as well. As opposed to just those strong partisans that we see typically come out. So North Carolina, like two other southern states, got extra districts. And so we'll have one more district in North Carolina where there is independent content. So people might come out and vote as well in these states. And we see this move with reapportionment has also changed the power dynamics in states where gerrymandering has occurred, North Carolina, one of them as well. So beyond that, how do we think about local factors? We know that ballot initiatives cause people to come out and vote, right? People want to have that voice on these direct policy impacts. After the leaked Dobbs decision, we saw in Kansas a large proportion of people came out and registered to vote that were not previously registered. 70% were women, and we see that impacting that abortion ballot initiative in Kansas in a way that protected abortion. So we have 4 states that have abortion on the ballot. Kentucky and Michigan are 2 of them. But beyond those states, will voters kind of come out to vote for this national question after the Dobbs decision? Will they come out and vote after the Lindsey Graham call to have a national ban on abortion in the Senate? So as is so related to education policy today, transgender issues are an important dynamic. We see it's difficult to get people to turn out to vote sometimes for issues that don't affect them personally. And so one of the things that happened, I have to bring in some history, World War II, right? The military was happy to have lesbian women in the service and during the war. After the war was over, they were not wanting them in the military anymore. And a tactic that was used to remove them was to discharge them, but also to make them name other lesbian women in the service. And they would say, if you don't tell us, like essentially give up our names, we will tell your family. And so we know that family has a powerful chilling effect on populations. And so some of the transgender policy issues that are so central are thinking about parents' roles in knowing about their children and their identity at school, how open that school is to individuals using different pronouns than what their families use, or the different names. And so we see in Virginia, Governor Youngkin has initiated a set of policies that will go into effect probably in late October, right before the election, that give states, schools, the power to restrict that openness. So one of the policies is that parents must basically sign off on their children using different names. And when we think about education, that's a central question that's come up, is where are parents' rights? Where are parents' roles and power over their children? So transgender policy issues are fundamental in education policy, but also in turning out the vote. And that's why I'm going to move to my favorite demographic, and a couple of my students are here as well, is the young vote, right? They're the most interested in transgender issues and coming out to vote. And we see that there's been a significant increase in youth mobilization. Say about 60% of 18 to 29-year-olds say they will go out to vote to express their opinion. Young voters care about different stuff than older voters, right? They care about the environment and racism and healthcare access. And so all of these are issues that young voters will, if they do turn out, can fundamentally change kind of the landscape. And we've seen a significant increase as well in voter turnout among the youth population. I know you can't maybe see the numbers as well, but about 50%, 60%. And even that 18 to 19-year-old, which has historically always been the worst demographic for turning out, has turned out in 2020 at about 40% in some of these states. So voter turnout, as you can see, midterms are significantly lower turnout. But I want you to look at that orange kind of number, or on the orange line, the last number, that's the 2018 election. And that was an election that people were motivated to turn out to vote essentially against Trump. And we will see if for these midterms people come out to vote for policies, or if they come out to vote against Biden, which has been a strategy of Republicans. We've seen a significant increase in midterms. Many states have moved toward increasing voter access through early voting. As you can see, states like North Carolina and Georgia had about a 20–30% increase of use of early voting. And with the 2020 elections, many of these states started moving backwards to restrict that access to early voting, reduce the number of early voting sites, just making it costlier and harder for individuals to vote. So what impact this might have on the election, we don't know for sure, but certainly it will likely impact those younger voters. And then my last slide, of course, will Trump be on the ballot? Will he motivate Republicans to come out and vote? The Democrats have been counting on it, motivating Democrats to come out and vote. So will that influence still exist? We've seen some endorsements up and down the ballot, but certainly in those key Senate races, there's been a lot of talk on his influence. So I will end there. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having us, and thank you for your interest in this topic. I'm very short, so I feel like maybe you can't see me. Should I try to, should I adjust it? No, just a minute. Okay. So my name is Amy Schumann. Again, I'm a co-founder of Women of Action. I also am the director of a nonprofit organization in town that's separate from this, but also really important to me. It's called Trinity Center, and I'm married to Michael, who works at Wake Forest, and I have 2 boys, one that we just sent off to Chapel Hill, and he seems to be doing okay so far, and then an 8th grader, which means we get to have a kid at home for a long time. So we're happy about that. But Sylvia said that you all might be interested in hearing a little bit about Women of Action, so I'll just tell you a little bit of background there. So we started this organization in 2016, kind of by accident in a way. There's just a lot of energy, especially among women, to after the election of like, how can I be more involved civically? And so a couple of people and I got together around a kitchen table and we were like, well, maybe we should invite people to come talk about this. And so from there, we just started getting more and more folks who are interested. Valerie was actually one of our members who was there from the beginning as we sat on Chrissy Robinson's living room floor talking about the state legislature, what does the county commission do, and all the things that we were learning together at the time. And we've evolved over time, but one of the things that's really essential to our organization is that we really kind of take our cues from members. So members bring up actions that they're interested in getting people engaged in. They bring about information, and so really the work of our organization is that we kind of inspire each other to keep going in terms of being involved and to do it in a very sustainable way. So that's a little bit about Women of Action, and we do community engagement, but we also are very big around civic engagement. And there's a number of different programs that we do, but by far around election time, the biggest thing that we're trying to do is get more people out to vote. And so we believe that when people vote, democracy wins. That's our slogan. So you may have seen these little pink magnets on people's cars, and I have some extra if anybody wants them. But we really do try to put the magnets on our cars. We wear t-shirts. We're trying to get the conversation around voting to be really kind of normal. You know, let's talk about what's going on. And so the other reason that we are big on voting is because we know that every issue that we care about, environment, education, safety, all of the things really come down to voting, right? Who is sitting in the seat to make decisions? And so we know that every single issue that affects us comes down to voting. So we started this election guide back in 2018, and it really was born from, it was right at the primary, and I was like, I feel like I need a visual map of this primary. I was like, you're hearing candidate names, you're hearing races, but how does this all fit together? And so this election slideshow is really meant to be like kind of a snapshot of what does the structure of this election look like? Because one of the reasons that people don't vote is because they can be overwhelmed, right? They don't know what's on the ballot, they don't know who to vote for. And so this is in an effort to try to make the information a little bit easier to follow so that people are more likely to vote. So that was the beginning of this election slideshow and how it was born. And I will say that our slideshow is just meant to be purely informational. So we don't, as Women of Action, endorse candidates or tell you who to vote for, but we provide information, education. We link to candidate websites, which we know is helpful. It's probably maybe the beginning of what you want to do when you're looking at who candidates are. But there are other organizations like League of Women Voters has a voting guide where they send out questions to candidates that they have to answer. Very informative. I would definitely encourage you all to look at that, and I can send a link. Democracy NC also collects questions and answers from candidates and publishes those. So those are kind of deeper dives into the candidate responses to questions, but ours again is kind of more of a general overview. So I'll take you through our slideshow. And I'm not going to do pause on every page, and you will get this after the presentation. But election day is November 8th, early voting October 20th through November the 5th. In the beginning of the slideshow, we try to pack in information about how to vote. You all in this room, I am positive that most of you are already registered to vote, but you might encounter someone who is not. And so one of the points that we like to make is if you do come across someone who is not registered to vote, and let's say they happen to miss the October 14th voter deadline, they can always register to vote and vote during early voting. So again, it's like the more we know, right, the more we can pass around that information. If you know somebody who is a young person who's 17 and they're not sure if they can vote in the election, as long as they're 18 by election day, they can vote and they can early vote. And we're really big on trying to get young people out to vote. And I will tell you that one of my proudest mom moments was my 18-year-old going to vote with me for the first time on Mother's Day. And it was my best gift. So we are really big on, we know the difference that those young folks can make in voting. And we know the research says if people start voting early, they will always vote. So we really want to get that going. Again, information on how to vote, voting early, absentee ballot information. So this slideshow can really be used as a reference guide to you. And I mentioned that it's nonpartisan, and another reason for that is we really want people to feel comfortable sharing this with anybody. Work colleagues, church groups, book clubs. You don't have to worry about, does this person lean one way or another politically? This information is really appropriate for everyone. Then we get down to what's on the ballot. This is a snapshot. You can see that there are all the way from our U.S. Senate seat, all the way down to our local election races. One thing that I would really tell you, if you want to use a slideshow, the best way to do that is to go to fcvotes.com, which is the Forsyth County Board of Elections website, and print your sample ballot. And this presentation is full of hyperlinks, so you don't even have to remember this. You can just click on it. But if you print your ballot, which I have mine right here, and I have a page and a half of people to vote for, right? If you print your ballot, you will actually be able to then just go down in the same order and look at each race. So we start with the federal offices, which is the U.S. Senate. This is a really important race in North Carolina. We're one of the states where it really hinges, the makeup of U.S. Senate really hinges on North Carolina and a few other states. Always put a little informational, kind of educational piece in there too. So just letting people know, currently we are right half and half. So again, this race in North Carolina really determines what the U.S. Senate is going to look like. U.S. House of Representatives, you all know that these representatives are re-elected or elected every 2 years. So all of those folks are up for election as well. When you move down to the state offices, as we've talked about before, and Sylvia and I were talking about earlier, a lot of people know about the national elections, but sometimes folks are not as engaged in the state elections. And so it's really helpful for all of us to remind people, vote all the way down the ballot. Vote for the federal races that you know the names, but do your research on the state offices and the county offices and the local offices as well. Judicial races are often under the radar, and we know that judicial races affect everything, including education, which I know is like the main thrust of this group. And in this election, so our North Carolina Supreme Court, we have 2 seats that are up for election. So currently, we have 4 Democrats, we have 3 Republicans sitting on the North Carolina Supreme Court. And the 2 seats that are up for election are held currently by Democrats. So again, this election will determine what is the makeup of our North Carolina Supreme Court. Personally, I wish that this race was not partisan. However, and there was a time in North Carolina where judicial races were not partisan, but for the last several years, they've been partisan again. But this is definitely one to pay attention to. There's also races for the North Carolina Court of Appeals. All of these races, you'll see when you print out your ballot, you vote for all these votes. They're not divided into districts. So anyone in the state votes for all of these seats. There are state Senate races and North Carolina House of Representatives races as well. Some of those folks are running unopposed for various reasons. Sometimes the districts aren't very competitive, or sometimes there's just been an incumbent who has had that seat for so long that folks don't feel like they really be able to be competitive with that person. As far as our district, there are district court judge offices up for election. The district attorney, which you may have heard about, this one tends to get a little bit more attention, I think, locally. And then as far as county offices, I'll just say a little bit about the Board of Commissioners. So again, we try to put some information up here to teach people. So as far as the county commissioners, you all may know this, but it's like a donut. So the center of Winston-Salem County is District A, and then the actual donut itself around is District B. And so 4 of these seats are up for re-election this term. And the person who is in District B, Don Martin, is running unopposed. The District A seats, you'll see those there, and those are for those folks that live in the donut hall again to vote for. And then the at-large seat, everyone in Forsyth County votes for this person. So again, like something that's really important to pay attention to. Valerie is going to talk all about the school board, so I am not going to talk about that. We also have the sheriffs up for election, and then this is kind of sad in my opinion. We only have one little nonpartisan election, and it's for soil and water conservation. And my understanding is that there are 2 seats and there are 2 people. So, anyways, maybe not as exciting, but let's give those people our checks. At the end of our slideshow, again, we just remind people about those early voting dates and where people can go to get more information. So, I'm going to turn it over to Valerie.
Hello, everybody. Just wanted to mark our rectification. I do not have any leadership position with Forsyth County schools. So just a mom at school. So I'm going to present to you about the school board. I want to say first that I support both Democrats and Republicans that are running, and I wish also that school board were a non-partisan election, but it's not happening. So I'm going to give you an overview first of our district. We have over 53,000 students. We are the 4th largest district in North Carolina and the 81st in the country. We have a student population that is very diverse. We have about 1/3 Hispanic, 1/3 Black, and 1/3 white. We have a total of 84 schools and over 7,500 employees. We are the 3rd largest employer in Forsyth County, behind Wake and Novant. And this year, budget for 22-23 for the school that goes from July to June is $750 million. And it's worth noting that because of the pandemic and the funds we're getting from the federal government, that budget is much higher than before the pandemic. For the pandemic, the total budget was about $500 million. So a lot of people do not really understand what the school board does and does not do. So their main responsibility is to hire and evaluate their superintendent. Our current superintendent is Tricia McManus. She's been on the job for now a couple of years. We've had 3 superintendents in the last 4 years. So really hoping that we're gonna keep her. So the board set educational goals and policies. So for example, if we have some parents of you, if you heard, there's a new code of conduct that was introduced this year at schools, and that's a work directly created by the Board of Education. They have to act as good stewards of the budget and staff. So for the budget, they're responsible for that $750 million. And also they're responsible for their employees. They have 7,500 employees, so they need to be a good employer. They follow the curriculum outlined by the State Board of Education, which leads me to the thing that they do not do is they cannot change the curriculum. So a lot of people are confusion about that. So the curriculum, the school board cannot change the curriculum. So for example, the SEL, we have heard about social emotional learning. that a lot of people are talking about. This is mandated by the state. So the school board has to do it for our schools. So they do not manage the day-to-day operation of the district. That's the responsibility of the superintendent and central office. They do not make decisions as individuals. So each school board has one vote, and to pass anything, you need a total of five votes to pass anything on the school board. So talking about the budget. So the budget, people think that the school board can move money, do whatever they want with the money. They do not like run. They do not run like a company. Like, for example, I'm a business owner. So when I look at the year coming, I project what money is going to come in, and I base my expenses on the money coming in. So for the school board, they're working actually right now on the budget for 23-24, and they get a pot of money from the state, the federal government, and Forsyth County. So the $758 million that they get, they know in advance of that year, 2 years ago, they knew how much they were going to get, and they cannot only spend that money. So they cannot run a deficit, and they have no tax authority. So when we say that they do not balance the budget, that's what it means. So every 4 years, we elect 4 board members. I hope you know if you are District 1 or District 2. So District 1 in purple has 2 seats, and that's Winston-Salem downtown, East Winston, North Winston. It's a majority, Black and brown neighborhood. And then you have District 2. We have 4 seats, and that's Rural Hall, Kernersville, Clemens, Louisville. That's the donuts. So if you live in, and then you have the 3 at-large seats. So if you live in District 1, you will get to choose a total of 5 candidates. If you live in District 2, you get to choose up to 7 candidates. So where do we stand after the May primaries? For District 1, we have 2 Democratic candidates who won their primaries. And they are running unopposed in November, and they will be on a board. And their names are Travonia Ron-Gaither and Alex Bohannon. It's worth noting that Alex is currently on the board. And they both are endorsed by FCAE. And FCAE is the Forsyth County Association of Educators, and they represent hundreds of teachers in Forsyth County. So then for District 2, our 4 seats, we have 5 candidates running for 4 seats. We have 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat. So this district is pretty much decided. Most likely all 4 Republicans will sit on the board because it's the district that means Republican. So the 4 Republicans are Stan Elrod and Leah Crowley. Leah Crowley is currently also sitting on the board. They are both endorsed by FCAE. And then you have Robert Barr, who used to sit on the board 4 years ago. He lost his election, I think, 4 years ago. And you have Steve Wood. And for the Democrats, you have Jennifer Castillo, who is also endorsed by FCAE. So I'm not spending too much time on those 2 districts because those races are pretty much decided. So really what's going to make the difference where we're going to go with the school board is who we elect for the 3 at-large seats. So we have 7 candidates for 3 seats. We have 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and 1 Libertarian. So for the Democrats, we have 3 at-large Democrats who are running as the Common Sense team. They are Deanna Kaplan, Richard Watts, and Sabrina Godfrey. Sabrina, they also endorsed by FCAE, the 3 of them. So Sabrina has volunteered for the last 10 years at a charter school. She's the PTA president, she's on the SIG team, book fair, and more. She was the finalist for the Volunteer of the Year for Forsyth County in 2022, and she's the mother of 2 daughters attending Winston-Salem Forsyth County schools. Then you have Richard Watts. He's retired from Forsyth County Schools. He was in the school for 32 years. He was a teacher, assistant principal, and principal. He was voted Principal of the Year twice by his peers, the only principal to be ever voted twice. And he currently works at Crosby Scholars. Then you have Deanna Kaplan. She's an incumbent. She won her seats 4 years ago. She's the current chairwoman of the Board of Education. She volunteers at multiple schools as a substitute and a reading tutor. And she's the mom of 5 kids that are all grown up. And they all went to Forsyth County Schools. And she volunteered at all her kids' schools. So that's it for the 3 Democrats. Then for the and on the slide, I have more information about them, about their vision, their platform. You get a link to that presentation, so you can go in and dig deeper, but we don't have time to go over all their platforms. So for the Republicans, you have Sarah Atcher. So she's a registered nurse, and she came during COVID. She came against the COVID vaccine. She decided to run for office because of the pandemic, and she disagreed about the way the school board handled the pandemic, shutting down the school and masking. And she's endorsed by Education First Alliance, which is a right-wing group based in Apex, North Carolina. That's her platform. Then you have Michael Harmon. He's got 3 kids currently enrolled in Forsyth County Schools. He's really involved in his church and coached youth athletics. He's an engineer, so he works for a local company that builds schools. And he's associated with a right-wing group from Florida called Moms for Liberty that is closely aligned with Ron DeSantis. I want to focus a little on those 2 groups, Education First Alliance and Moms for Liberty, because those are important groups that you need to be aware about. Those groups really focus on LGBTQ kids. They especially obsessed, I feel, with trans kids. They're all about parental rights. They talk about grooming, these kind of words, and they also want to remove books from school that they deem inappropriate. So those are 2 important groups that you should be aware about. So then we have Alan Daniel, that's the 3rd Republican running. He's the father of 2 children in Forsyth County School. He left his software development career in the 60s to become a teacher. He taught math as a substitute teacher in 2016 and 17, and in the fall of 2017, he's no longer teaching in Forsyth County. And I believe he's doing math independently from the district, and he has no endorsement. Then the last candidate is Regina Garner. She's a libertarian. She's a young mother. I think she's got a 2-year-old. And I know her because I saw her at there was a meeting in February, school board meeting, where there was some kind of a kerfuffle. If you heard about that meeting, where some people served bogus papers to the board, and she's part of that group. And she's running as a libertarian. So both don't have endorsements. So on the presentation, I've got link to everybody's website. I will encourage you, if you want to find more about Moms for Liberty and Education First Alliance, to check their Facebook page and Twitter. I think their main webpage may not tell you everything about who they are, but if you go to their Facebook page and then their Twitter account, I think you'll learn much more. So you ballot in November. That's the way it's going to look when you go to the school board for District 1. So you can go, vote for up to 5 candidates. And then District 2, that's the way your ballot is going to look like. So I hope, I know everybody in this room is going to go vote, but please share, with everybody and feel free to, once you learn about, candidate that you support, to, email your friends, because if you do the research, a lot of people do not do the research. And people trust, their friends and people they know, and they will be very thankful to you for reaching out to them and tell them, hey, I researched, this race or other race or any other race. And I feel like, I believe these candidates will be great for school board. And you will see a lot of people will thank you because a lot of people do not have time to do their research. So that's me. Thank you.
So we have some time for questions. So gather your thoughts. We've had a lot of material presented to us. Almost too much to take in. I'm glad we have some things to take home with us. I don't know about you, but as a product of public schools from kindergarten through grade 12, and a mother of 4 children who likewise were products of public schools, I think I was pretty naive in thinking about school board elections, the future of public schools, thinking that there was always room for improvement and that we should work for that in every way possible. I also was an employee of the public schools for 12 years. And so it was with some surprise and dismay that I began to realize that there was a really long game that had been going on, not just with school board, but with other elections as well, by particularly folks on the conservative end of the spectrum, which recognized, perhaps in a way that some others didn't, just how much of an impact could be had if you were able to get control of school boards or other local bodies, elected bodies. And so when I pick up something like the New York Times and a whole issue is devoted to, well, what are schools for? And realize that there are those who think that the best thing we could do is maybe not just improve, but get rid of our school system. Then I'm really taken aback and realized that our speaker of last month cautioned us that we who believe in public schools likewise need to be engaged for the very long haul and to stay in the game and to be influential in every way we possibly can. So I think we've got a lot of information this morning. I wonder what kind of questions you have that you'd like to ask these folks. Yes, Gail.
Mine is not a question, it's just a statement. I don't live in District 2, but you don't have to vote for 4 people in District 2. So if you research the candidates and there's 2 or 3 that you think would be acceptable and the other ones aren't, you can vote for those and hope that those candidates get more votes than the ones that you really don't support. So just because it says on the ballot, when I looked at it this morning, you may vote for 4, but you don't have to vote for 4. So that is my unpaid political analysis.
Well, thank you, Gail. And to repeat for the folks on Zoom, Gail is reminding us that if it says you may vote for 4 or you may vote for 3, you don't have to. And I do think it's important too to recognize, however, that if it's also important not to limit your vote to one party just because you believe strongly in one party or the other. Because if we do that, we may leave the door open for more extreme candidates to be selected by those who do vote for them. So in other words, I may tend to vote in one direction, but I have every intention of voting across party lines for candidates that I believe will be reasonable candidates dedicated to the future of our schools for every student, every group that is served by our school system. Okay, next question. Yes, Bob.
Will the observers be present for early voting? What can be done to protect the voters from the observers?
Okay, question while you're thinking about who wants to take that. Will observers be present for early voting? And what can be done to protect voters from any kind of harassment or, okay.
Yeah. I'm not an election official either, but yes, I think observer votes will be present. I know that in the 2020 election, even being able to be an observer was difficult because so many people wanted to be. I'm sure you thought that some observers, at least in the Republican side, have been told to bring cameras with them. So I think that, you know, it's important for people, if you're an observer, to be vigilant and kind of, you know, point out if you see things, but also for people who volunteer to be campaign workers, because that's going to be the most important role, is having campaign workers that are able to protect the voters. So those chief judge positions, those positions that find voters in the system.
Before I take the next question, in our last presenter last month said that, and it was a little humorous but also scary, talking about the fact that two positions that normally you wouldn't think are particularly exciting or adventurous are those of poll workers and librarians, and both of those are under attack, and to the point that there are folks that are afraid to do either of those things. Okay, question over there.
Can I just mention one thing too?
Yes.
So another opportunity that if folks are interested, Democracy North Carolina will train you to be a vote protector. And you may have seen folks, I've done it before, they stand outside the polls, they're in yellow t-shirts. And essentially, if any voter has any sort of concern, question, issue, if they've been turned away, if they've been harassed, that person in that yellow t-shirt can help them call the voter hotline. And that voter hotline is staffed by attorneys who are election specialists who can help that person with information. So if anybody's interested in playing a role in helping to protect folks at the polls, that's one way you might consider doing that.
Thank you very much. Yes, over here.
And my comment is related to that. There's also something, there's an organization called Lawyers and Callers, which is, they have a hotline as well, and clergy can actually be inside the polls. Instead of being outside, they can actually be inside the polls. And they can be, they call it a vote chaplain. So we can watch the observers and everyone else and what's going on. I've done it in the past, I'm going to do it again this year. So it's another opportunity to sort of help peace and make sure that everything's going on and be sort of a calming presence.
And I'm sorry, you said that's clergy and who else?
It's called Lawyers and Callers because on the hotline they have law students and lawyers who can answer any legal questions. Should there be any trouble?
Thank you. Isn't it interesting that I don't remember having these kinds of discussions, you know, as I learned to vote, participated in voting, worried about. I didn't have a word about being intimidated. Okay, other questions? Yes.
This does not have to do with local particularly, but there's a case that's coming up with the Supreme Court that has the board's name on it. And do we have any way to influence how that, to give our opinion about how, or are we just having to sit and wait?
Do we have any way to influence the cases that are coming before the Supreme Court?
Thinking about the board case.
No. But if we think about it, and this is something that we see the Supreme Court as having this supreme power, but ultimately Congress can override them. So that's going to be the way to, is to vote for those people that are aligned with your values.
I do remember in the early Smart Start days when that was such a matter of controversy that in various representatives' offices, the person manning the phones kept a little tabulation of how many people said what, how many people supported, how many people opposed, and it did have an influence. So we should not underestimate, if we're willing to make those kind of calls and emails and so forth, there it does pack some punch. Other questions? See how we're doing with time. Do we have any questions in the chat? No. Okay. Anybody else?
Yes, there is one. Sorry. What's the best way to share these presentations?
What's the best way to share this presentation? Sylvia, are we putting all of the slides
We will
on?
be posting this on slides, but I would also like to hear again from Amy and Valerie, are there other ways that people can get that information?
For mine, you'll get a link that you can widely share with people. So if you want to put a friend group together and you want me to come and present, to your house, I'll be happy to do that. But at this point, it's really word of mouth and getting this link to as many people as possible for my presentation.
I do think it's helpful and instructive to go online and look at some of these organizations that are endorsing candidates and also look at the candidates' Facebook or website. There's some really interesting stuff if you look closely. Some of that. And there's also an opportunity for us to look at ways to speak truth to power. Because for me, one of the most troubling things on all levels, local, state, and national, is how quickly something becomes truth that is not, it's disinformation. So trying to find facts and trying to find ways to get those facts out. Yes, there was a question. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
I was just going to add, so I'm going to give y'all an action item. This is what we do in Moment of Action. So when you get the slideshow link, this is going to take you 10 to 15 minutes. So all you have to do is carve out that. When you get the link to the Moment of Action slideshow, go ahead and print out your ballot and follow along with the slideshow, and that gives you a good understanding of how it can be useful. And then I want you to make a list of all the groups and people you're going to send it to. Because as I said before, you can send it to anyone, it's informational, it's nonpartisan. And then encourage those of you who send it to share it with others. I mean, that's how we get the word out, right? Is we just share and encourage others to share. And then the other website I mentioned, so League of Women Voters, vote411.org, and perhaps we can link to that one too. But there is some really rich information on almost all of the candidates. A couple of folks did not respond, but you will get people did not hold back. They're very candid with their values and beliefs and what they think should happen in terms of school board or the legislature. And so I really encourage you to look at that as well.
Right.
Yes. If I can make one comment and then share a question.
Yeah.
Just make sure everybody here knows about our email list, if you're not on it already, because we'll be emailing out information and also in a Facebook. So if you're not already on our list, we have a sign up sheet there. Sign up. And then we have a question. This person says, who serves as our district attorney? What can these speakers tell us about the two candidates?
I'm sorry, say that again.
District attorney.
I couldn't quite hear.
What can they tell us about the candidates for district attorney?
The candidates for district attorney, who wants to speak to that?
I don't think any of us have the information, but like I said, I think using these resources will be helpful. I think that's the best thing to do for any of these candidates. It's just to go online and kind of dig a little deeper, but hopefully the few resources that we've given you will be a really good place to start.
And I think you went through it pretty quickly, but looking at vision statements and value statements that candidates give can be real clues, because we have legitimate values questions that we can debate, and honestly on any side of these questions. So looking to see where their values are and whether you agree with those or not.
I think I'm still looking at social media, looking at social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Right. Looking at Twitter and looking at other social media. Yes,
One thing I wanted to mention is there's going to be 2 school board forums coming up where you can come and listen to the candidates. There is one on October 12th, next Wednesday, at the Reynolds Auditorium, and this one is organized by Mr. Wiley, who's a social study teacher at Reynolds, and he's working with students. So students are going to ask 4 questions to the candidates, and the candidates are going to answer all those 4 questions. And then on October 19th, there is a school board forum at Jefferson Middle Auditorium from 6:30 to 8. And all 14 candidates are coming to both forums. So it would be also a good way to support, the PTA for Jefferson, and the students are there to show up and support them. So the Reynolds Forum is from 6 to 8 p.m. and the Jefferson is from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Yes, and both, we have 14 candidates total for school board, and they all are RSVP for both events.
Right. Did I say a question? Okay. No? Yes.
In reference to the two district attorney candidates, what I would say is a native of the city and a mother of an 18-year-old boy. The male DA candidate, the incumbent, is an advocate for school prison pipeline, and the retired judge, Ms. Hartsfield, she's come off the bench because by the time it got to her, she saw it was too late, so she come off the bench to prevent there being a school prison pipeline. So that's just a high level, very simple overview.
Thank you. I think we're about out of time. Yes, one more question, Chuck.
Yeah, so I appreciate the statement. I think the future our schools is part of this election, combined with the every vote counts. Can you just speak to the margins between the candidates that have been historically? I mean, like the margins between our different candidates are pretty small. And so like literally every experience is a couple of people determines the course. Is that how the data?
So the point being made is that some of these elections are determined by a very small margin, and so every vote counts. And we forget that sometimes.
Especially for the midterms, because there's a lower turnout, so whoever is more motivated to come out. So we cannot, even though Forsyth County means Democrats, it can go either way.
Anything else? Sylvia, you want to tell them about next month?
No, I will. Thank you. Let's once again give our very important that we have your contact information if you don't think we have it, because again, there's so much information in these presentations, and we'll get it out to you as quickly as possible. And we'll also have information about the two forums as well. We hope you'll join us next month on November the 1st, where we will be focusing and showcasing a presentation that the Winston-Salem Foundation and Triad Cultural Arts has put together and will be at Union Station. It's called Rooted in Race, and it's a story of our community's history with school integration, and to look at the history and also carry that through into current challenges with equity in schools. So we'll have presenters from the foundation, Cheryl Harry with Triad Cultural Arts, and the historian Anita Justice, who has curated that presentation. So we hope you'll come and join us. And also one more thing in the back, we have a list, a paper that if you have topics for further discussions or further Faith in the City programs, please give us your ideas. We try to be current. We try to draw upon what we're seeing in the community and interest. And there's a lot out there, and we can benefit from your participation and your information and your interest as well. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you to those on Zoom who participated, and we will be in touch, and we'll see you next time. And thank you once again to our presenters.